Prayer pods are the future of worship.
Jonesy.
Jesus Christ! Pontius shit his damn pants in there.
Fucking farted on your knee, dude.
Hello, I'm Danny McBride, the creator of the Righteous Gemstones, and I'm here today at the IndieWire studio in Los Angeles on the IndieWire Filmmaker Toolkit podcast.
So going into the final season of the show, in terms of like where you and your writing partners get started, what are the initial conversations, and is it different from a typical season? I mean, do you feel more kind of self-imposed pressure to stick the landing?
You know, it's kind of interesting because even as I approached this season, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it the final season or not. This is a very awesome show to be able to work on. It's in my backyard. I love all the people I'm working with. But yeah, as I started kind of like looking for ideas for this season, I just kind of was like, it was pretty obvious that a lot of the ideas I was kind of gravitating towards were about closure and sort of about ending. And so I just kind of followed that, and I just kind of like made that kind of what the path was. And I never made any sort of announcement to the crew or to the cast when we started that this would be the last one. And part of it was because I wasn't sure if it was. You know, I was like, who knows what will happen while we shoot the season? Maybe an idea will come. Maybe there'll be some sort of guidepost that says that this story deserves more. But as we shot, it just became apparent more and more to me as the story was continuing on that this was like we were wrapping this up, you know, and that this was pushing towards an ending. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of became obvious to me that that's what we were doing, that we're kind of wrapping this story up. And there was part of me that I didn't want the vibe of the season to be like finale, you know, like there's something, sometimes I notice it when a show is ending that you can kind of see it in the performers. You can kind of see them saying goodbye to these characters. And I didn't want that. I really wanted it to feel like the other seasons, and I wanted it to feel like it was doing its own thing and not to like veer into being too sentimental. And I even cut stuff out of the last episode where I could see it in my own performance or in other people's, of like, yeah, this is the actor saying goodbye, and this isn't like there. And so yeah, it was definitely emotional as we got to the end and everyone could kind of feel that it was wrapping up. It was definitely sad, but ultimately it was important for me to kind of like stick an ending and to make the story complete. I was really fearful of I don't know, this job turning into something where I would sleepwalk through any of the seasons. You know, that's kind of what's interesting about TV, is that like a sign of success is that you just keep going and going and going. But sometimes that can be at the expense of the journey you're kind of trying to take the people on.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you did a really good job of avoiding what you're talking about in terms of telegraphing that it's the last season. It kind of snuck up on me, even though I knew it was the last season. I wasn't thinking about that until probably the last 10 minutes of the last episode, and because you really pulled that off. But one of the cool things that you do with this season is the season premiere is this like great sort of standalone prologue set in 1862 with Bradley Cooper as like an ancestor of the Gemstones. Where did that idea come from?
You know, I grew up in this small town in Virginia, Spotsylvania, Virginia, and, you know, the neighborhood I grew up in was like one of these sort of like, it was a brand new like subdivision built in the early 80s, and, we just moved there. And so, it was built in these forests and these woods that like nothing had been there, and so in my backyard, I would like, go in the backyard and I would find Civil War bullets. I found a belt buckle back there, So there was something that I've always been attracted to history. I think maybe just from growing up in a place that had so much history, and like being able to put context to things that you see in textbooks, but then out your backyard, I was like seeing like remnants of it in real life. So I've always been kind of interested in that. And yeah, it just felt like an interesting challenge to try to task with everyone I work with. Like, can we pull this off? Can we kind of create something that feels credible in this time period?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fascinating. There's like this little mini movie that's set during the Civil War that somehow still, I'm not exactly sure how you pulled it off, or if it's just because it naturally comes from your voice or whatever. Like it feels like it belongs to the show, even though it's a completely different setting. And you talk about like the challenge of everybody pulling it off, and I'm curious like what some of the logistical challenges were. Even like thinking about, like, my memory is that towards the beginning of the episode, there's this kind of tracking shot of a battle sequence. I mean, it's like something out of Glory, or
Yeah.
that you're doing in like a cable TV comedy show.
Yeah, one thing I really enjoyed doing with Gemstone, with every season of it, is, we'll sort of jump genres and have action set pieces and all this. And a little bit of that comes from just having faith in the people that I work with. That Richard Wright, who's the production designer, I went to college with him. I've known him for a long time, and I appreciate every season trying to like drop things in his lap that push him to create things that he's never had to do before, So part of it was exciting to sort of like see what we could pull off. We had less than 10 days to shoot that episode. Most of it is daylight dependent except for just a handful of scenes. Which, made shooting it very tricky. It was, we would have to, even if there's day, we'd have to wrap like every day by like 6 so that you could make turnaround the next day and get in there. So everything became about like what was our vision, but then what can we actually pull off? And that opening shot in the war was done simply for like logistics. It was like we only had, I think, like 200. We had 200 extras that day, which I'm not saying that that's a lot, but as written, it was a battle scene, and I was like, well, once we put 100 Union guys here and 100 Confederate soldiers here, this is going to seem pretty small. And what are we actually going to film? We only actually have a half a day to even shoot this. So we don't have a full day to get one, this one scene. So then it became about like, well, why don't we just put all of our resources on one side, and why don't we just kind of focus on one shot, and then we can just practice that over and over and over again. And then since we only have 4 or 5 hours to shoot this, hopefully we can have enough rehearsal and enough practice that like when it comes time to do it, we can just execute it and pull it off. And so that was sort of the idea for that. But, a lot of it was that like the coverage would be dictated by how much time we actually had to do it. There's a walk and talk with Bradley and this like young kid in the back of like the wagon where they're like marching with these troops. And so, again, it's like, we're shooting that scene and we're shooting that ambush that happens to them later, later after that scene. It's all one day. We have like maybe, total, maybe like 8 hours to shoot the whole thing. And we realize after the very first take of the walk and talk that it's a 45-minute reset in between takes, because you have all these troops and you have horses and they have to go down this trail. So you quickly have to kind of like figure out, all right, but I can get like one take of each of these setups, and maybe I can do 3 setups, and we have to move on. And that's where it was really helpful to have somebody like Bradley Cooper in there, who he's just such a pro and he's game, and you were never doing it again because of him. He was always delivering, and that was like essential to pull this off.
How did you get him? Was he a fan of the show, or are you friends with him from before? You guys you're in Aloha, right?
We were in Aloha together, so I met him there. I've always been a fan of his work and of him as an actor and even as a director. I just knew when we kind of crafted this episode, I was like, this is going to be a tall order because this show is an ensemble and like it relies on lots of people. And now we're going to have an episode that doesn't rely on an ensemble, and it relies on no one that the audience is showing up to see. So it had to be somebody that was going to be able to like not disappoint the audience when they showed up for this season, and and suddenly it's no one that they're ready for. And so I kind of think I threw it away, like, oh, it should be somebody that just has charisma and charm, like someone like Bradley Cooper, and then one of my producer partners was like, why don't we just ask him? I was like, all right, well, there's nothing to lose there. So I sent him the script, and he responded like instantly, and he was into the idea of it. He was into the material. And then he told me that he had actually never seen Gemstones. Like he hadn't watched it, and he wanted to hold off on watching it until we were done shooting because he just didn't want to be influenced by what the tone of the show was when we pulled it off. And I appreciate that. I thought it was like a smart way to do it. I think sometimes when you have guest stars show up on shows that have been going, a lot of times they want to get laughs the way that people on the show get laughs, and it can influence performances. And sometimes it can make a guest star come in and kind of do an impression of what other characters are doing in the show. And so I thought it was smart of him to kind of identify that as a pitfall and avoid it.
This season for me was just so packed with great comic ideas, and I kind of just want to run through some of them and ask you. I mean, like, for example, I love the Teen Gis series that Uncle Baby Billy comes up with, which, honestly, to me, didn't feel that ridiculous. Like, I could see, and maybe with the title Teen Gis is ridiculous, but I could actually see, like, a teenage Jesus series, like, actually being
crushing.
successful. Yeah. If you're great at that. Where did the idea from that come from? And was it, like, is stuff like that influenced by any actual like faith-based shows or movies that you see or anything like that?
Nothing specifically, but it is that interesting thing where, like, with some of these mega churches and some of this faith-based stuff, it's like they're taking the same cues that Hollywood is taking, like, and so if there's like teen shows working in Hollywood, I could only imagine that they would be kind of creating its own answer. So a lot of that stuff, but that happens a lot with us on the show is we'll create stuff that we think is pushing it far. And then like months later, we'll see things in the news or on social media where you kind of are like, oh, are we pushing it enough? Like some of these people are doing stuff even crazier than what we're presenting here.
Well, that's what I was wondering is, yeah, like how much of it is stuff that where you're building on reality and how much is just pure acts of imagination. 'Cause there's all these crazy ideas in this season, like there's the like the prayer pods and the stuff with, the wearing the jet packs and when they do sermons and things. Like how much of that is just springing from your imagination and how much comes from actual research or observation about this world?
Those ideas are all just springing from my imagination for all intents and purposes. It's I just put my mind on like what would they think was a good idea, and they're all kind of extensions of the characters. So it's not really influenced by anything I'm seeing in the real world, but oftentimes, like I said, we would do these things, then we would see reflections of it in the real world. So but we were never really pulling from stuff we were actually seeing for real.
Hmm. Has your approach in terms of like the way, something I really find interesting about the way you approach this whole world is it's absurd and it's hilarious, but you're not exactly like, I don't feel like it's never mean-spirited in terms of like the way you're making fun of it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's nothing condescending about it. There's nothing superior. I mean, has that pretty much, is that kind of what your intent was from the get-go? And has that remained pretty consistent throughout?
It was important for me, like when I first started looking at like doing this show and like having this family and this mega church and stuff, I was kind of like looking at like, well, what are other things that have been in this space? Like what are they? And do I like them? Do I not like them? Where do they go wrong? Where do they go right? And it started to become apparent to me that like a lot of times I'd be turned off by stuff in this space because I feel like it is kind of mean spirited. Like I just kind of feel like making religion the butt of the joke. I don't know. I just like I don't know what this is all going to add up to, and I wouldn't be pompous enough to kind of like, haha, it's definitely not what these people think, So for me, it was about making the gemstones the butt of the joke and not making people's faith the butt of the joke. And then with that, I would hope that people of faith would be able to like watch this show if they wanted to. I mean, they might be turned off by all the dong we hang in it, but ultimately maybe they would see some truth in it.
Well, speaking of the dong you hang in it, one of the striking images this season, I think it comes towards the beginning of episode 4, maybe, is Walton Goggins water skiing naked.
Yes.
And I have to admit, the first thought that came to my head when I saw that was, how did they do it? Is it a prosthetic? Is that Goggins actual Goggins we're looking at there? And what were the conversations you had to have with him ahead of time?
It was not Walton Goggins. It was not his penis. It was they were stunt penises, I guess. They were cast. And interestingly enough, we've never used the same penis twice. Every time we show Walton's penis, it was always a different elderly stunt double coming in. And for that particular sequence, we had to have an elderly penis that knew how to water ski.
I'm just curious. You do have a fair amount, not a lot, but you have a fair amount of full frontal male nudity on the show. I mean, do you have I guess this is maybe a highfalutin word for it, but do you have a philosophy about male nudity and its role in comedy and why it's funny?
I think inherently I just find it funny. Like there's something that's so shocking about just like, you know, seeing seeing somebody, penis hanging out, running around. Like there's something that makes me laugh. But then what would start happening is when we would hand off to these different directors, be it Jody, be it David, a lot of times like we would just slip them in to make us, the other people, laugh. Like I would show up at set and I'm like, why is the intimacy coordinator here? And and they're like, David's got the guy in the background pantsless, just like Jesus. So sometimes it was just to humor each other. I think we were just being immature.
Well, since you mentioned the other directors, I'm always curious how that works on a TV show where you've got multiple directors, but the show has to have a consistent voice, but you also want to be taking advantage of the specific ideas that specific directors have. I mean, how do you all kind of, for lack of a better word, coordinate, and how do you as a showrunner kind of create the right environment to keep the style consistent, but again, be absorbing like the best of what each of these individuals has to offer?
I mean, because I went to film school with David and Jody both, and I've known them for a long time, I kind of inherently know like what they respond to and what stuff makes them excited. And kind of like anything with this show, whether it's dropping a set onto the production designer or having some specific wardrobe for our costume designer to figure out, I like to try to like hand them episodes that I feel like, will keep them enticed or push them or make them excited or dealing with something that I feel like they might have fun biting off. So I think it's like a little bit of it is easy for me because none of these guys are like guns for hire. They're people I have like a deep relationship with, and I understand where they come from and what makes them click. So I'll try to basically give them material that speaks to their strengths and keeps them engaged and make them have fun. And because the show can jump genres and can do different things, I think that their different stylistic approaches is helpful in creating the overall tone. I think it's interesting to see what David can do with these characters and what Jody can do, or like this season, Jonathan Watson, who directed. I trust all their sensibilities, and so that makes it easy.
Well, you brought up the costume design, and the costume design on the show is insane. I mean, it's like I can't even go through specific examples because any given episode, every character is dressed so outrageously. I mean, my retinas are still seared from BJ's suit that he wears at the wedding in the last episode. I mean, it's just like unbelievable. And I mean, where does your costume designer come up with this stuff? I mean, like, are these pieces things that they're actually finding that exist, or again, is it all out of the imagination? Because I mean, I feel like either way, it's crazy.
Yeah, some of it is definitely custom, and some of it is there, is stuff that they're pulling. When we started the pilot, Sarah Tross was our original costume designer, and I kind of told her, I'm like, the gemstones, like I want there to be the gemstones each should be represented by a gemstone, so almost like Power Rangers. That, like, Kelvin is green, he's like an emerald, and Judy would be blue, and Jesse is sort of like, would be red. And so that was sort of like all the direction of like, just kind of keep their palettes that way, that this is sort of like the color that drive some of these choices of what they're wearing. And then the other thing was just that, like, I wanted this to be like country cool, like they're spending their money in a way like they're celebrities, like they're big shots. And so I think when Christina came on as costume designer to finish up the third and fourth season, I just wanted them to have fun with it. I was like, these are the basic rules of this, and just go for it. Have fun and create stuff that is going to make us laugh every time we show up on set and have to look at each other dressed like this.
And then, you mentioned again how the show jumps genres and stuff. And one of the things that's always been fun for me about the show is that, sometimes there are these little homages to other movies, things like this season, that whole Cape and Pistol Society thing. There's like this great kind of like Barry Lyndon moment where, the Barry Lyndon music comes in and there are these kind of slow zooms, this very Kubrickian, which, and for like the most ridiculous, situation. And I'm curious for you, like, because I know you're a big film buff and everything. I mean, what, like, aside from Barry Lyndon, like, are there other movies that you had on your mind this season that were things you were kind of referencing or parodying that you can?
God, I'm glad you picked up on the Barry Lyndon. I'm trying to think if there's anything. Monkey Shines was definitely a little bit of an inspiration this season. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in particular. I feel like those on this were like, maybe those were like the main two, but that's the deal. I mean, with all the people I work with, the collaborators, like we are, like our background is film and a love for film. So that ends up being kind of a point of reference always for us, is like, it's like this movie or it's like this movie. And sometimes taking something like Barry Lyndon and injecting it into the stupid shit we're trying to do just creates something special.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up, the Monkey Shines influence, because like the last few episodes of the season, one of my favorite developments was the introduction of Dr. Watson, the support monkey that BJ gets after his pole dancing accident. And that monkey actor is incredible. I mean, he's really, really good. What were the kind of, I guess, logistical challenges of working with a monkey as one of your key actors in the
Probably the fact that it's a monkey is probably the most challenging thing. Doesn't really take direction well. But it was, yeah, I mean, it was like, once again, it's like, it's always just sort of tasking the production with stuff we haven't tried to do before. And then we all learn along the way. But that was definitely, fun to kind of play around with. And then, even just, like Tim Baltz having to kiss this monkey and get comfortable around the monkey. And, yeah, it was fun. It was just, us just being ridiculous.
Shifting gears to casting a little bit, you have a lot of flashbacks this season with young Jesse and Judy and Kelvin, and those actors are unbelievable who you cast as the kids. I mean, they really, like, the guy who plays the young you just like nails your mannerisms so dead on. How did you find those kids? I mean, what was the casting search like?
It was all local casting. Lisa Mae Fincannon, she's done our local casting on everything we've done from Eastbound and Down, and she just has a real eye for this. And there's a lot of talent in that region of the country. And so, it was really funny because the first season when we did that interlude and we cast those young kids, like, we had no clue that that'd be something we'd be coming back to. And we were so impressed by what they were able to do. That it just became something we kept writing to with each season. And I feel like they're just such gifted actors, and the fact that they were able to like emulate these characters and performances, I felt like it just made the story feel richer, and it really felt like you were watching the young versions of these characters because they were tapping into cadence and just things that it's not just like the physical looks. It was just the energy of the performance they were tapping into, which was smart for them being so young to kind of get that and to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, I mean, did you have to like work with them at all, or was it just, did they just look at you guys and look at other episodes of the show and just kind of pick it up?
It was that. I mean, we were kind of blown away when they were coming with it. It wasn't expected, and then as we saw it more and more, it was something they were just doing naturally on their own.
I mean, they're like you said, the cadence and just the pitch, the voices is so dead on. I mean, it almost had me wondering when I was watching it, like, if you guys were doing anything in post to like digitally weave your voice in with the actor who
No,
plays you.
not at all, not at all.
Well, I guess that's high praise to that actor then. Going back to the Dr. Watson character, to the monkey, that speaks to something else that I love about the show in general, but especially the last couple episodes of the season, is I actually felt like, as absurd as all the Dr. Watson stuff was, and again, like, as funny as the monkey shines thing, like, there's another case where you have like a great kind of zoom or something, or just push it on the monkey, like watching, Judy, and it's just like, it's almost like a Fatal Attraction thing or something. But there's also this kind of genuinely touching aspect to the relationship between BJ and the monkey. Like, when they're reunited, I was actually getting tears in my eyes a little bit. And I felt like in the season finale or series finale, you really achieved something interesting there, which was the last few minutes of the show kind of snuck up on me and were genuinely poignant and sincere. And I'm curious, like, how you kind of strike that balance where you're not sacrificing any of the comedy, you're not sacrificing any of the ridiculousness on the show, but somehow you laid the groundwork to earn those sincere moments in like the last few minutes of the episode and have it work. And I'm wondering, like, how much of that is in the writing, how much of it is what the performers are giving you? Is it something you had to mess with in the editing a lot to find the exact right tonal balance?
It's important to me what you're getting at, is because I feel like at the end of the day, like, if it was all just like lunacy, I feel like it would be like too indulgent, But the idea of like being able to send it into outer space and then challenge yourself with still trying to land it on planet Earth at the end, and to try to say something that resonates with people on a level that maybe is unexpected. I mean, I feel like that's what we were constantly trying to do with the show, is just sort of present one thing and then surprise people with what you can do with that. And so what's great about the show, working on it, is just that, these actors, everyone understands that that's the assignment, And so as far as we'll push things, and as far as these performances will go, or these gags will go, everyone knows that at the end of the day, it has to land back with something that resonates with people. And so that's where, that sequence at the end, where they get Dr. Watson back, and Edie gives that like speech to Dr. Watson about the hole in her heart and about how she has that hole too. I mean, the first time I saw it, I was like had tears in my eyes watching her perform, and I'm like, this is so silly that we're sitting, and like that thing is particular. Like the monkey's not even in that shot; it's like a stuffed animal she's giving this to, and I'm like, this is so crazy that she's so good that I'm like moved by this, as ridiculous as this situation is. And to me, it was like that's the magic in all of these performers' abilities, is that they can make me laugh, they can make the audience laugh, and they're good enough and they're talented enough to still like get real emotion from the viewer at the end of the day.
No, absolutely. Well, so now this show has taken up your life for the last several years. Do you know what's next for you?
You know, I have ideas what I wanted to do, but you know, it's very similar to like when I finished Eastbound or when I finished Vice Principals. There was a part of me that like I'm so monogamous when I work on something like this. I just like it becomes my entire life. I spend every waking moment sort of on it or thinking about it or trying to figure out where it's going. And so for me, it feels like that time period, once it's done, to just shut it down and kind of empty the brain for a while and just kind of live a little bit and then kind of figure out what's next. Like, you know, we finished shooting Vice Principals in 2015, and then I wrote the pilot for this in 2017. So, and I know that when Vice Principals was done, I had this like moment of panic of like, oh shit, what if I don't get to do this again? And I'm trying to come up with all these ideas and everything. And there was something that, there's something difficult about like letting go, but I think in that, if you do it, I think you can kind of open yourself up to maybe what the next story is that people need to see. And, you know, we started this thing in 2017. The world's changed a ton since then, and there's probably new things to talk about. And so I think now's the time just to kind of empty the brain and kind of be open to what else is to come.
Well, I will just say, if you can't let this world go again, I want to put in my plea for an Uncle Baby Billy spinoff, because I really want to keep seeing that character. But you know, it's a great show. I've loved this show since the beginning, and I feel like you guys really did nail it with this final season. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with me about it, Danny.
Cool. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it too.
Thank you.